Good evening, this is Goldy, also known as Mr. Anecdotal, Mr. Pasty, and the Talking Head. It's Wednesday, July 11th, 2012. Remember, most importantly, I rant so you don't have to. There are some people I rant at, though. So, if you want an inaccurate transcript of this show, send me an email to goldyrant@gmail.com. Sorry I've been out of touch for a while. I was dealing with a death in the family. It's time to beat my head with a stick again. This rant will be free range, so I'm going to ramble within certain subjects. I want to talk about the right answers to three problems with a sidetrack to healthcare. The three problems are the critical nature of the slippery slope, the protection of the commons, and related commons spending by government. The right answers are, well, I guess we'll get to that. Now, I care about your kids. I have friends that have kids. And when I do this, I'm doing it for their kids. And that's the concept that I am thinking about. What is it going to be like in this country 30, 50 years out? Otherwise, I could just go to Costa Rica and forget about all this crap. My dad passed away last week, and he was a major sounding board for this rant. So this is in honor of him right now. This particular one's dedicated to him, Steve-O. So I'm going to go through a couple of things here. And what we're trying to find here is the actual right answer. I drove about, 30 hours listening to AM radio last week. Let me tell you what's not on AM radio. The right answers. Let's go through the first one, the slippery slope. When I talk about the slippery slope, I'm always talking about the slippery slope of civil liberties and civil rights. So I'm away from and I'll read something for you here. So I'm away from the secure location May 21st, 2012 in the New York area, minding my own business as usual. I'm driving in a rented Subaru with Kansas plates. Oh, and of course I'm white. At the Stamford, Darien, Connecticut line, there are 20 cops stopping anyone of color. This is what kills me. The point of this country is innocent until proven guilty. That is a term that means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the founders. So many, in quotation marks, conservatives, they may be Republican or not, talk about the founders. They were very concerned with intrusions by government. That was the big concern. Innocent until proven guilty. And we've become a country of guilty until proven innocent. The point is that we will not and cannot prevent every crime. This is kind of like that whole thing following 9/11. You're not going to prevent every bombing, every crime, every terrorist. You can't. The only way to do that would be to put cameras inside every house, every street, every store, everywhere. You still wouldn't be able to prevent every crime. They'd figure out a way to get away from the cameras. We will not and cannot prevent every death. It cannot be done. That's the point of the country. It's the entire point of the Fourth Amendment. No discretion on who to pull over. No discretion as to who gets wiretapped. Discretion. I choose you. There are very specific things the Fourth Amendment says. No discretion as to who has a camera on them. Let me read it again. The rights of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath, which is capitalized, or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Let me just give a couple of examples. There's an article, it was way back when, February 18th, 2011, in the Austin American Statesman. It's a company flies robo-hummingbird spy plane. I'll read a quick part. A pocket-sized drone dubbed the Nano Hummingbird has been developed for the Pentagon as a robotic mini spy plane, capable of maneuvering on the battlefield and in urban areas. Your backyard, my backyard. The miniaturization of drones is where it really gets interesting, said defense expert Peter Singer, author of The Wired for War, a book about robotic warfare. You can use these things anywhere, put them any place, and the target will never even know they're being watched. At the end of the article. For now, the drone is just a prototype, Keenan said. But 10 years from now, he sees the technology being used for reconnaissance missions. But it's not likely to be a hummingbird, considering that it's a rare bird in, say, New York City. I'm not a bird expert, but a sparrow seems to be better, Keenan said. What would the possible use of a bird drone be in New York City? June 28th, 2011. Austin American-Statesman. Sorry, this stuff is just so painful. I almost need to walk around, but I don't get good light to walk around. Google says it gives user data to government in most cases. Google Inc. disclosed on Monday that it complied with 94% of U.S. government requests for data about users of its services, including YouTube, in the second half of last year, shedding some light on the internet search companies' behind-the-scenes interaction with law enforcement. Anything you put on Google, they get. On March 20th, 2012, I was watching the local news in Connecticut, and apparently there was a kidnapping and murder of a little girl in a Jewish community in New York. They were interviewing a local Jewish leader, and he said the phrase that I dread to hear, and if you hear it, you should be scared. This should make you scared, regarding the placement of 174 cameras in his community. If it will prevent just one death, it will be worth doing. If you hear that phrase out of anybody, it means they're trying to sell you the cameras, or they don't know what they're talking about. Because you cannot prevent all deaths, you can always do something to prevent one death. You could ban cars. You have like 30,000 deaths per year. Just ban cars. I know it's a stupid example. It's the Socratic method. You go to the stupid example, the radical example, the far side of the pendulum example, and that's how you figure out when something doesn't make sense logically. If it will prevent just one death, it will be worth doing. This also bothers me because he was Jewish. Do you, a person who's complaining of anti-Semitism, really want the authorities to have discretion over innocent people? It's the slippery slope. It's why we always have to fight. And the idea of paranoia. Not being paranoia when it's true. Cameras. The Cisco commercial that shows the one woman looking at all of those apartments above those stores on the street. They get you used to it. They get you used to cameras. I'm not saying it's a grand conspiracy. It's a grand conspiracy by camera vendors and those that are allowed to buy them using our tax money. And remember the old poem about how first the Nazis came for the defective, the homosexuals, the gypsies, the Hungarians, the Jews, and then they came for me, but there was no one left to complain? The slippery slope. The slippery slope is the A1, number one most important thing. More important than anything. The slippery slope of the erosion of our liberties. Because there's no one there to complain about it. People are just trying to put food on the table. This relates to a story that my friend in Colorado told me to where, apparently, she's from Colorado. In the U.S., the number of white babies is less than 50% compared to all babies of color. The thing about this, and racial profiling in particular, is that whites are not pulled over and therefore don't care about people of color being pulled over. It's just the nature of it. What happens when whites are in the minority and they're the ones being pulled over? Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? I've talked about it in terms of Costa Rican cops. I've dealt with it. They don't stop me. I'm white. Big white target. I said it the last time I was there, and I was looking forward to going back to the U.S. Now, we are fearful of the cops because they stop people walking, looking for their passports. I said I was looking forward to going back to the U.S. where I can walk around and not be detained unless I did something against the law and not be surveilled. But apparently I was wrong. The slippery slope. And here's the July 13th, 2011 Austin American Statesman. This is an Austin law enforcement report. Whites searched less when they're pulled over. And they're just as likely to be carrying contraband. And I don't want to hear the arguments that blacks and Hispanics commit more crimes. Not per capita. Yesterday I was called by Fox News. And it was really, they were about to put up the cameras at 12th and Chicon. So they did a phone interview with me. And I went back to my entire arguments in the old days. I asked a bunch of questions to a commander in the Austin Police Department. Who's going to man the cameras? Where are they going? What's the sweep? How strong are they? Are you going to record them? Who's going to watch them? Who gets to watch them? Who do you share it with? Fusion Center? Anyone? City officials? What if the Downtown Austin Alliance paid for some of the cameras? They get to look at the images. I reminded them of a story they had done 6 months ago that showed that since the cameras were installed downtown, violent crime was up. People who are going to commit a crime don't care if the camera's there or not, it turns out. London has learned this lesson. In fact, the Austin Police Department put out a COPS manual specifically showing studies that the only thing that cameras actually do above de minimis catching of past crimes, so somebody hits you on the head and kills you, they may catch the person a few times. The main thing this manual said was it makes you safe in places where there are cameras. And just think about that. The places where cameras get put up are places where you shouldn't feel safe. It's completely counterintuitive. So that was on KView News on maybe July the 10th, 2012. I haven't looked at it yet. You should check it out. None of those questions have been answered, and they're going to put the Halo cameras up. I said I'm not worried about Big Brother. I'm worried about Big Stupid Brother, which is a couple of guys wheeling the cameras around. And she goes, oh, they're on automatic. This is the newscaster who was interviewing me. They're on automatic. And I go, then how are you going to look down at a crime? How are you going to find a crime? Aren't people going to go around the corner into the alley? Do you need to put cameras up in the neighborhoods right there? Or do you need to keep, because they're going to keep walking away from where the cameras are? So let's say that it does deter crime. It's only going to deter it on that specific corner where that camera is. Do you need cameras everywhere? Why not Mike the cop on the beat? So she goes, this phrase, message phrase, you can imagine when she said this to me. So there's a recording of it. I can't wait to hear it. So she goes, well, which do you prefer, cameras or crime? I said, who came up with that choice? Why is it cameras or crime? Why isn't it cops or crime? What a phrase. So if you're against cameras, you're for crime. My God, Fox News, you're local. So there's only a few of us caring about these things, caring about cameras going up, caring about racial profiling. 9 justices on the Supreme Court said it was okay to actually ask for your papers if they had a reasonable suspicion. Some of it was overturned, the Arizona law. Some of it was not. Racial profiling. All of these amendments, the actual Constitution, the real Constitution, the one with the words in it. The right answer is never allow any more intrusive devices or actions to be enacted or used by government. That's the only way. That's the right answer to the slippery slope. You have to stop it at every point. That's the purpose of the ACLU. Although they get sidetracked from time to time. God bless them. No, you cannot stop somebody because of their color. That is not our country. No, you cannot have cameras looking into the bathrooms and backyards and who's coming and going to certain properties in the city because there's some crime on the corner. Maybe. Because they don't want to get a cop out of his cop car or her cop car. Those crimes go on when those cars go by all the time. All the time. The right answer, no more cameras. That's the right answer. It doesn't prevent crime. It might solve a couple. Who cares? And by the way, I give the Second Amendment. I agree. You can carry a gun with a permit. There's not going to be enough cops around to protect you. You have 6 minutes. Somebody breaks into your house. 6 minutes till a cop will show up if you can hit 911 in time. No problems with it. Don't label me with some liberal anti-gun type of thing. I'll go for all the amendments. They all matter. The Fourth Amendment really matters. The First Amendment really matters. The Fifth Amendment really matters. Okay, the Second Amendment really matters. I don't care. Second part. The tragedy of the commons. So I'm driving along and AM radio. I'm going to call it what it is, pro-Republican. I'm not going to give it any other definition. They're attempting to get Republican candidates elected on AM radio. That's my general view. I was scrolling through the entire time. Okay, commons. It's really pretty simple. Air, water, land, taxes, and common areas owned by no one, like national parks, or like the Gulf of Mexico. So you remember this rant really started getting going back when I thought I knew the unified field theory. I knew it connected everything. It turned out I was completely wrong. Could be wrong now, but I was definitely wrong then. The BP oil gusher. Figuring out that regulators were completely wink, wink, nod, nod going to get jobs at those oil companies afterwards. Figuring out that these oil companies were actually writing the leases and the regulations that they would be operating under. Figuring out that legislators would put pressure on regulators to approve leases with inadequate safety. Figuring it out. That was one good thing about my dad. He was a good sounding board. I was like, this just seems so strange. The whole Joe Barton thing. He was trying to protect BP. In any event, BP and Shell had put up plans a few months later after the gusher was gone. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze at some point. To drill in the Beaufort Sea. And I have a story from the Wall Street Journal, July 11th, 2012, just talking about it. BP Shell run into Alaska offshore setbacks. BP said Tuesday it is shelving its Liberty offshore drilling project in the Beaufort Sea after deciding the company's current plan isn't up to the standards it promised to follow after the Deepwater Horizon catastrophe, and that revamping its drilling rig to meet those standards would be too costly. That is a statement from the company. They decided that it isn't up to the standards. No, potentially some regulators are getting pressure in this election system, in this election cycle from the Obama administration, said, you know what, we're not giving you a permit right now. And if you complain about it, you won't get any more, because they have that power. However, BP said it was working with regulators to find a way to revive the plan. This is like 6 miles under ice, and they built an island so they wouldn't have to use offshore regulations for their EPA impact study, environmental impact study. Separately, environmental campaigners on Monday filed a lawsuit in Anchorage, Alaska, seeking to challenge the federal government's decision to approve Shell's oil spill cleanup plans. The action is one of several by ecological groups that are opposed to the company's drilling plans. I'm going to give you an aside here. So we're talking about the commons and protection of the commons. On one side, you're always going to have these companies and individuals that want pieces of the commons. They want to drill for nothing. They want to mine for nothing. They want to pull trees for nothing. They don't want to pay anything. That's cool. That's their incentive. But there's a significant difference between environmental groups and corporations. Now, when we talk later on about overturning Citizens United and getting rid of any spending, corporate campaign spending, union campaign spending, nonprofit campaign spending, I'm willing to sacrifice those groups for my constitutional amendment. Only human beings. But in any event, we're talking about the commons. So, main point is here, BP and Shell, they give jobs to the regulators when they come out. They write the regs, they write the leases, they write the laws. They give money to senators and congressmen, representatives, unlimited money in super PACs under Citizens United. So now what the commons is these specific items that if left unregulated will be decimated. The example, of course, is that if you had no Clean Water Act and you were a shoe manufacturer, you are next to another shoe manufacturer and you're spilling your crap in the river and the next one down is spilling his crap, you are not going to unilaterally impose restrictions on yourself to make it more costly for you to produce your products. That's the tragedy of the commons. So the commons, by definition, needs regulation. Effective regulation. I'm not going to say it's effective. We know the big problem. Grid operators fears electricity shortage under new EPA rule. This is July 20th, 2011. This is in Texas. This is going to cause blackouts. You do these new Clean Air Act things on coal and lignite. Oh my God, well, we need nuclear power. Study. Most U.S. nuclear plants have leaked radioactive tritium. This is into water, air, land. June 21st, 2011. Also American Statesman. Most U.S. nuclear plants have leaked radioactive tritium. Tragedy of the commons. They write their own regulations. They say, you want the power? You have to let us leak. That's the deal. Pretty simple. Here's one, July 29, 2011. EPA plan would regulate pollution at oil gas wells. Proposal targets those drilled via hydraulic fracturing. We've heard about how much regulation has actually occurred in fracking. Water catching on fire. Polluted water. We didn't do it. Mini earthquakes in Fort Worth that they've never had before. We didn't do it. They have their incentive. Maximize profitability. It's our duty to regulate. What's the right answer? Effective regulation. When you hear whiny anti-solar oil people, and you look back on all the subsidies that were given to the oil and gas industry and automobile industry, and you see how there's no such thing as the actual free market. If you want to call the free market influenced by every influence that's out there, every tax break given to this guy and not given to this guy, every roadblock put up for this but not this. Really simple. What is China doing? Here's an article from July 10th, 2012, Wall Street Journal. China to cut fuel prices for third month in a row. They are trying to grow their middle class. They're trying to keep their middle class happy. Therefore, make it cheaper for the middle class to drive and buy cars. Is that a free market? I don't know. Do we have a free market here? I don't know. Is the price of gas kept artificially low? Yes. We don't pay the real cost of damage to the country, damage to health, damage to the roads, damage to the air, damage to water. The real damage caused when you build an electric car, disposal of the toxic chemicals. We don't pay the real costs. That's pushed off on the commons with taxpayers to pick up. My car is dumped over there and leaches into the drinking water. What's the right answer? The right answer of the tragedy of the commons is effective regulation. Effective regulation. This will all come together. So let's look back at those cameras. Who's really the main actors pushing the cameras? It's the vendors. They're trying to get at the commons of tax money. That's controlled by city council members and the police chief, or whoever they delegate their committee to buy which cameras. They only have incentives to spend. The Justice Department gave money for the cameras at Runberg and 35 and downtown, and maybe some of the money that's going at 12th and Chicon. Well, we have to use the money. And so these vendors just pop up. Here's cameras that'll work. Here's Cisco trying to sell software. They only have an incentive to spend, not an incentive to not spend. I was driving through Tennessee and a couple of guys on AM, and they were talking about we need to send legislators to Washington who are moral on spending, that will do the right thing. Why would we expect them to be moral? Why would you ask anybody to be moral? They won't get reelected. There's no term limits. They need to raise money. They need donors. But let's stick with this local incentives to spend. City council members, Travis County commissioners, Williamson County commissioners, purchasing agents within APD. So this is a local versus federal. Well, one way that we've come up with, my Tea Party friend and I, is bonds equals taxes. You've heard me say it before. The right answer is that phrase. Bonds equals taxes. The idea that you're just going to borrow some money and it's going to have no effect on taxes, I don't care how you actually tell me that that's going to work and you say my taxes aren't going to go up the first year. You're lying. It is impossible to borrow money and not pay it back. Now, this whole idea of growth is a different thing. We incentivize and subsidize subdivisions out in the outlying areas. We sell bonds to extend water and wastewater service out there. Those bonds are paid back with tax money. Tragedy of the commons. Those developers give money to those local city council members. City council members word the bond election language. They word it. They create the language. And you know what it doesn't say? When we sell this $2 billion worth of bonds, it's going to cost you, the average homeowner, blank dollars per month. They don't say it. Bonds equals taxes. The right answer, local spending. Bonds equals taxes. If all of these bond issues that were approved, the public library, stupidest thing they've ever done. The new courthouse, second stupidest thing they've ever done. 140 million, 300 million. Just throwing around numbers are going to cost me $72 per property per year. For what? A new courthouse? I don't care about the trial lawyers being in a crappy area, smelling urine in the bathrooms. I don't care. Public library, don't even get me started. If you had presented both of those ballot issues as blank dollars in bonds, and it's going to cost you this much per month or per year per homeowner, based on an average $200,000 house, how many of those would have passed? Zero. Zero. 17 million for the little bypass around Town Lake, where they don't have access to Town Lake Trail. 17 million. Bonds. Reallocation from something else that's unused. So whatever you sold the taxpayers on before, you're going to use it for something else. The right answer to local government spending, bonds equals taxes. We don't have the money. You may have heard about the bullet train in California, July 9th, 2012. Friday's narrow state Senate vote approving $4.7 billion in bonds for the train and related projects sends the funding bill to a likely signing by Governor Jerry Brown, a proponent of high-speed rail. The vote helps ensure the state will get to keep $3.3 billion in federal matching money for its efforts to build the nation's first bullet train. Federal officials had warned the state it had to commit to the funds this year in order to use the money, which mostly came from President Barack Obama's 2009 economic stimulus package. Finance experts said the state should have little trouble selling bonds for the issuance because interest rates are so low on many alternative investments and the stock market has been mixed. The bonds approved by the legislature are part of nearly $10 billion in state bonds that California voters in 2008 earmarked for the train network. I would characterize the demand for bonds as insatiable, said Jim Sarney, managing principal of Payden Regal Investment Management, a money management firm in Los Angeles. Do you know why? Because they'll probably be graded like AA+, AAA minus. Purchasable by people that can be paid who run retirement plans. Rated by ratings agencies, paid for by the bond underwriters. Whores. We're all whores. But whores, nonetheless. Insatiable demand. There's an insatiable demand. But if we didn't approve these things, there wouldn't be bonds sold by the city of Austin, Travis County, Williamson County. The right answer, bonds equals taxes. I would bet you 3,000, 5,000 placards knocking on doors would kill any bond issue this November. Okay? For local, the local answer to spending, the answer is bonds equals taxes. Now for federal, it's a lot tougher. And it deals with the tragedy of the commons. Because I consider taxpayer money the commons. You've heard my answer before, I'll say it again. A constitutional amendment. Term limits for congressmen. We want to create a class of citizen politicians that go do their duty for 2 years or 6 years or whatever number of years that people come up with. 3 years for reps and 4 years for senators. Something. So they're never running for re-election. Do the right thing. I've talked about Citizens United. Corporations and unions are not people. Citizens United was decided by the Supreme Court, and it is allowed for these super PACs. Probably $3 to $4 billion are going to be spent on this presidential election. Most of it spent by organizations that would not be allowed to donate directly to campaigns. Organizations, that means more than one person. I would have a constitutional amendment, only human beings above the age of 18, or voting age, let's call it, can donate a maximum of $100, increased by inflation, including self-funded campaigns and in-kind donations. That's right, I'm going to be very strict. And my amendment would say, I am specifically going to limit the free speech right of these entities, which is what was found in Citizens United, that there was a free speech right of these entities, as though the founders cared about corporations and charters. They didn't care about any of that. They cared about private property. And the ability to stand on a soapbox on a corner or rant on Ustream. That's what the founders cared about. They did not care about a corporation being able to lobby and form a super PAC and give the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, $1 billion to run anti-whatever campaigns. Constitutional amendment. It's the only way. No revolving door for regulators. Like I said, Minerals and Mining Service, those guys will go back to work for Exxon and BP. So they know they have to be favorable. Legislators, those guys go to work on boards. Their board of directors. Dick Cheney going back to Halliburton. The right answer. I mean, if you think about it, democracy is about one man, one vote. One person, one vote. And then we send these people up and we hope they do the right thing. We don't do legislation by referendum. We send them up there and hope they do the right thing. These guys asking them to be moral. Let's eliminate the incentives they have to spend. Let's eliminate the incentives they have to give away the commons. Let's eliminate the incentives they have to allow pollution to occur. And not be paid for by the industry that's doing the polluting. Why wouldn't we? If the electricity to clean up the coal dust really costs this amount, then that's how much the electricity costs. Figure out conservation from there. That's the only way the price will come down, and it will actually occur. Tragedy of the commons, government spending, federally, constitutional amendment. We will need to limit the free speech rights of corporations and other groups. Explicitly stated. And you can't rely on the Supreme Court for anything. I've said this since Bush v. Gore. The idea that Roberts is building his legacy was dead in Bush v. Gore. They decided Kelo, where a city could give private property from one person to another. You get paid for it. But it wasn't for a school or a road or anything. It was for a new Pfizer development that would generate more tax money. Luckily, a whole bunch of states passed laws you couldn't do that. And then, of course, Citizens United reaffirmed a couple of months ago. Can't limit the free speech rights of these entities, unions, corporations. And then John Roberts hopping on the healthcare train. My dad would have been the first person I called that morning. I called a couple other friends that also do this. Nobody would have ever guessed that it was going to be 5-4 with Roberts being the swing vote. It should prove to Republicans, because the main reason to elect the president, the main reason is appointments of Supreme Court justices. That's the number one reason for me. That's what I said. I said this up to about a week ago. When I was outside of Nashville, I was driving. And I realized, which I've talked about before, that damn pendulum. That pendulum swings. So, let's look at what Obama has done. This is not an Obama thing, but all of the pendulum items that occurred during the Bush presidency, the drug war, Patriot Act, privacy, undeclared wars, baby killing. For him, it was Iraqi and Afghani, Yemeni. For Obama, it's kill list for assassinating citizens. Anti-war movement. Where's that? Anti-corporate movement. So everybody that was anti-war, anti-corporate, anti-defense spending, anti-killing of babies, anti-drug war, anti-privacy intrusion. All these people voted for Obama. I did. You know what I think? I think for those critical civil liberties, and these absolutely critical items, we are worse off. We were worse off. What would have happened if Al Gore had been the guy? Do you think he was not going to be doing things like the Patriot Act? He was during the Clinton administration. Maybe he would have started out a little weaker. I mean, it almost looks like, for purposes of the pendulum, the critical pendulum, we would have been better off if McCain had been elected with nutcase Palin. We would have been better off. Those of us that care about undeclared wars and assassinations, kill lists, drug war, anti-corporate movement. You realize the reason why Occupy has failed, contrary to what Democracy Now! Says? Occupy is a failure. I understand they're trying to keep it going. I love it. It's a failure because it's a Democratic president. If it had been a Republican president, it would still be going. Because the energy of the Democratic Party would be there. The energy's not there. You know why? It's our guy doing it. How can I prove this? Talk to any Democrat and go, why is it okay for us to kill Honduran babies, but it wasn't okay for Bush to kill Iraqi babies? And they'll go, what? Why is it okay for us to kill Libyan babies? What? The pendulum. I'm not coming up with a right answer on that. I already told you constitutional amendment. But Obama has proven Ralph Nader to be correct. Do you know how hard I had to argue against Ralph Nader people? Call them idiots. I thought there was a significant difference. There is not a significant difference between the two bureaucracies. Excuse me, the two parties. Two parties are just trying to get the goods for their people. They're entrenched, and that's it. These are my people. I want to get them the goods. Republicans, it looks like white minority South Africa trying to steal the last of the diamonds before the black overthrow. For Democrats, it's like we got to get our goods and benefits now in these unions because they're going to go away. We got to get everything we can right now. These are two giant bureaucracies that do not care about either of these things, any of these things. Constitutional amendment or bonds equals taxes. Neither party cares about that. You know why I know that? Because I never hear it. When you see Bernie Sanders' constitutional amendment, it's only for-profit corporations. Why? Human beings only. When you listen to AM radio, you don't hear any of those guys talking about a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. The structural defect in the system. They're just like, elect Republicans and the country won't go down the tubes. I promise you, elect Republicans and the country's going to go down the tubes. However, I may be able to get my constitutional amendment through. Because you can get the energy of the Democratic Party to do it. The Tea Party just doesn't have energy. Or they would have been effective. They haven't been effective. They've been subsumed within the Republican Party. So I hate to say it, but for my critical civil liberties, I'm not saying I'm voting for Mitt Romney. I'm just saying I've been completely screwed. We have been screwed by this administration. Screwed royally. It was better when Bush and Cheney were the enemy. It was better. It was easier to get things done. More oversight. Now it's our guy doing it. I'm going to go on to this quick mundane matter of healthcare. Again, they just want to get their guy elected. And when they say massive tax increase, what about huge increases in premiums and reduced coverage over the last 10, 15 years? And when you say tax increase because there's a mandated penalty, tax penalty or whatever it is, those people don't vote. And when you say you don't like socialized medicine, I have to give you this example. Guy is standing in emergency room door. Public hospital. Leg gets cut off, spewing blood. What do you want the doctors to do? Well, 100% of America. We don't have time to ask about insurance. We don't know the answer. Does he have cash? We don't know. Blood is shooting out of arteries. What do 100% of us want to do? Want the doctors there to do? They have the equipment. What do you want them to do? Save the guy's life. That is what our culture has gotten to. It's a great thing. 100%. I'm not saying there's not one or two idiots that are like, let him die. We need to know if he has insurance first. But you can't find out, so you would let him die. It has nothing to do with insurance. It has to do with socialized medicine. Is there some minimum standard of care that we want our doctors to fulfill for any person they see that is in a life-threatening situation? The answer is yes. And then the question comes up at that point is, how do you pay for that? I'm just going to explain to you what the mandate is. How do you pay for that? Well, I don't want to pay for insurance because I'm willing to take the risk that if my leg gets cut off in the emergency room door, I'm just going to die. Well, our society has said that we don't want you to die. It's just the society. That's how it is. You can go somewhere else where maybe they do let you die. I don't know, China, I have no idea. It just doesn't happen here. So the question is, how do you pay for the risk that your leg is going to be cut off in the emergency room door? How do you pay? Even though you don't want to pay. Socialized medicine. There we go. The rest of it's just gradations. Do we pay to put the leg back on? Do we pay for a lung transplant for somebody that's been smoking cigarettes for 40 years? Do we pay for inoculations? It's all gradations coming from the extreme example. So when somebody's whining about health care, you just ask them that question. And if they say, let them die, walk away, because they're lying. They certainly wouldn't say it around their family or wife or friends. They're saying it to you because they don't like you. When they talk about tax increase and how much more it's going to cost, and how we have the greatest healthcare system in the world, we have excellent healthcare. We don't have the greatest healthcare system in the world. Some people cannot change plans because they've had a pre-existing condition. But yet we've defined healthcare as some certain minimal level of care. So how do you make a private company give that minimum level of care? You can't. It won't work with private companies. So if Romney doesn't win and this goes through, we will have two systems of healthcare. We'll have private insurers and people that pay cash for whatever they want, whatever doctors they want. We'll have the secondary system of government-run healthcare, which may or may not be better than the current system that we have today. They certainly won't be able to stop you because you have a pre-existing condition. Yes, there will be rationing. There is rationing now. Yes, there will be death panels. There are death panels now. It's called your policy. If it does not say that you're going to get a heart transplant and you need one, you die. The panel already decided. You don't get the coverage. Don't listen to the message words. My main point of this part of the rant, it's not the right answer. The right answer is that we do demand some minimum level of care for every person that is in that situation with their leg cut off in the emergency room door. Then you can argue, all right, how much privacy are we going to give up? Do you have to admit that you smoke cigarettes? Do you have to pay more premiums or taxes? I said in the beginning Obama should have called it the tax. We never would have had a problem. But he wouldn't have been able to pass it, so. How do you pay for that minimum level of care? Well, you have government doctors, some government hospitals, and you pay taxes for it. The rest of the people can pay cash. Who cares? Sean Hannity doesn't care. O'Reilly doesn't care. Glenn Beck doesn't care. They have unlimited health care. They have tons of money. There's no issue for them. This is not an issue. It's an issue for those of us that were paying $195 a month in 2000 and are now paying $795 for about one third less the coverage and a higher deductible and higher copays. And I've got to ask this, why shouldn't these Republicans, I'm not going to call them conservatives, but why are you okay with Medicare? It's socialized medicine. It's government health care. Why don't we get rid of that? Why don't I hear anybody saying we need to get rid of Medicare and give vouchers so they can hire private companies to give them health care? Because they're political. They're not trying to find the right answer. I've identified the problem. There is a minimum level of health care that our society demands. And it's the stopping of the bleeding of the cut off leg in the emergency room door. That's it. How do we pay for that? And how does every single person who has that risk pay? Simple. Now, I don't have the right answer. That's the only one I don't have the right answer of. So it's really simple. On the slippery slope, we don't allow any more intrusions, no more cameras, no more data mining, no more nothing. Because we can't stop it, and once it's there, it's gone. These are critical amendments to the Constitution. Yes, the founders didn't anticipate the internet. It's a living document. They anticipated other privacy intrusions, though. Securing their person's papers and places. These are my papers, this document, this email. Protection of the commons. The right answer, proper regulation. How do you get proper regulation? You have to eliminate the incentives, term limits. Corporations are not people, only human beings. $100 per person. Even self-funded campaigns and in-kind donations. Editorializing on Fox. Sorry. No revolving door for regulators, legislators. The right answer. That will cure some of the incentives, most of the incentives. Bonds equals taxes. That will eliminate approval by voters. Eliminate. Now I'm doing what these guys do on AM radio. Let me tell you a fact. I'm not telling you a fact, but my strong conviction and prediction is that if you showed how much the taxes went up for any of these items, nobody would approve a thing in Austin. No one. No one. They wouldn't approve anything. And they'd have to have discussions on how they're going to raise taxes to fund water and wastewater out to this development out at the F1. Oh, what a world that would be. And then the right answer on healthcare. It's not really the right answer. It's just we demand some minimum level. How do you pay for it? I mean, if you say you want emergency rooms, just local emergency rooms to treat people, then that's fine. At least that's a consistent argument. People that don't have insurance and can't get it in the 3 or 4 companies that are approved to do business in the state of Texas would go to the emergency room at the public hospital and wait, and they've got sniffles and they get cough syrup, and it costs $200, and somebody with a cut off leg died. The right answer. That's all there is today. I want to thank our sponsors, all of which support this form of conversation, but not necessarily the content. PianoByAngelo.com, Angelo Limbesi's, who teaches and plays keyboards all over Austin. ZetaDesign.com for all of your decorative painting needs. AustinAreaPlumbing.com for all of your Austin plumbing problems. www.ticoadventurelodge.com, a small hotel in Samra, Costa Rica, and my southern office. CNC Surf School in Samra at www.cncsurfsamra.webs.com. They can get anybody up on a board. La Vela Latina, great sunset bar and restaurant in Samra with a nice new red chair. Ambar Tequila at santospirits.com. And another cool green hotel in Samra called The Logan at www.thelogansamra.com. And of course, the Delicate Genius in Houston, who is a platinum sponsor. Thanks for coming out.